All right, let's dive right in today. We're going to take a closer look at Microsoft and their role in the world of FHIR servers.
FHIR servers.
Yeah, and we've got some interesting data to dig into from a recent survey of FHIR server providers.
Right.
The results are kind of surprising, honestly.
Yeah, a little bit.
A little bit. So without further ado, let's jump in. So the big takeaway from this survey is that Microsoft Azure is like the most popular choice by far for folks setting up their FHIR servers.
Yeah, it really is. 34% of the respondents in this survey went with Azure. Now, I gotta admit, the survey sample size wasn't enormous,
Right.
but the trend is definitely something to pay attention to.
34%, huh?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a pretty significant chunk. So, I mean, we all know Microsoft is a massive tech company.
Yeah.
But what is it about their offering that's making them so dominant in the FHIR server space?
Well, it's not always about the tech itself, A lot of times these decisions, especially when you're dealing with something as sensitive as healthcare data, they come down to business factors.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm sure a lot of our listeners can relate to that, that whole business needs versus tech desires struggle.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what is it about Microsoft Azure that's making businesses so happy?
Well, one thing that makes them attractive is that Microsoft's managed FHIR servers, they actually offer a pretty easy on-ramp.
Okay.
They're well documented, and they do a solid job of implementing the FHIR R4 specification. So if you're a company that's just getting started with FHIR, Azure can be a really great way to get your feet wet.
So it's kind of like that starter apartment, right?
Yeah.
Easy to move in, but maybe not your forever home.
Precisely. I mean, you might hit some limitations with the managed service as you start to scale up and your needs become more complex.
Makes sense. So what kind of limitations are we talking about?
Well, for instance, Azure's managed FHIR servers, they don't currently support FHIR subscriptions.
Okay.
Which is a pretty key feature for real-time data exchange. If you think about it, imagine you want to get updates on a patient's condition, like as it's happening. That's where subscriptions come in.
Ah, okay. So real-time data updates are kind of off the table with the managed service for now. What other limitations should folks be aware of?
Well, another one is that they only support FHIR R4, which is the latest version of the standard, and that's great. But it could create some challenges if you need to work with older systems that might not be fully up to date.
Right.
And then if you're working with large data sets, you got to be aware that the results actually get truncated after 100 resources. So you might end up having to make multiple calls just to get all the data you need, which can be a little bit of a hassle.
Okay, got it. So easy to get started, but maybe not ideal for more sophisticated or complex use cases. What about Smart on FHIR? I mean, that's a big one for app integration, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, Smart on FHIR is really powerful. It lets you essentially build apps that run directly on top of a FHIR server. So think of it as a way to seamlessly integrate your apps with healthcare data. But the implementation on Azure's managed servers can be it can be a little bit tricky.
Okay, so that's a bit of a snag. And what about implementation guides? I know those can be really helpful for making sure that everyone's speaking the same FHIR language. Any built-in support for those?
Not really. So as we've kind of, we've touched on, the managed service is a great starting point. But it might not have all the bells and whistles that some folks need.
Yeah.
However, Microsoft does have another option up their sleeve.
Okay.
And that's their open source FHIR server.
Really? So even if I'm, kind of tied to the Microsoft ecosystem, for whatever reason, I'm not necessarily stuck with their managed service.
Nope. Not at all.
Interesting.
Yeah, think of the open source version as like a playground for developers. It's where a lot of the new features and bug fixes, they often show up first in the open source version before they make their way to the managed service.
Oh, that's cool. So it's kind of like a sneak peek into the future of the managed service.
Yeah, precisely. And if your organization is really concerned about data security and having that control, running your own instance of that open source server gives you a lot more, control over your data and how it's managed.
Right. You're in the driver's seat. So, okay. So there's definitely some flexibility within the Microsoft world when it comes to FHIR.
Yeah.
But stepping back for a second, I mean, we've talked about how dominant Azure is. What do you think? Like, what are the implications of that for the future of FHIR itself? Is this a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Or is it somewhere in between?
Well, that's a $1 million question, really. On the one hand, having a major player like Microsoft so heavily invested in FHIR that could really accelerate adoption and help standardize things, which is really great for interoperability.
Right.
When everyone's on the same page, data can flow smoothly. That's the ideal scenario.
Yeah, absolutely.
But on the flip side, there's always the risk of vendor lock-in. If everyone becomes too reliant on a single provider, it could stifle innovation and limit choices down the line.
Right. So it's kind of a trade-off. You've got the benefits of a big player driving things forward, but then there's also that potential downside of having all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly.
Well, this has been really insightful. I think we started out asking why is Microsoft so popular?
Yeah.
And now we're kind of grappling with this question of what does this all mean for the entire future of FHIR? That's a proper deep dive.
It is.
Thanks to everyone out there for joining us. This has been a great conversation. And keep those fires burning.
Keep them burning.